Good evening. This is Dominic Stiller. I am the chair of the Queens CB1 Transportation Committee. Tonight is our Wednesday 4/2, April 2nd, 2025 committee meeting, 6:30 p.m. I will first take attendance. Please say yes if you're here and no if you're not here. Kian Betancourt, no. Adam Cox.
Here.
Shehanaz Hamde.
Here.
Yuma.
Here.
Tom Ryan. Bob Feltow.
Here.
Daniel Aliberti. Amin Mahedi. Nas Magutas.
Sorry, here.
And myself, Dominic Stiller. Yes, I'm here. And then from CB1, we also have Evie Hensopoulos, chair. Happy to have you here. Kenyella Williams, Phyllis Para, and Brian Martinez. So our first topic of presentation from the Department of Transportation is 31st Street improvements. The DOT Research Implementation and Safety Group, RIS, will present on a corridor safety improvement program for 31st Street. Project will include pedestrian improvements, vehicle traffic calming, new bike connections. And that will be presented by predominantly Rachel Metz and Chris Brunson of the Safety Projects and Programs Department. So please, Rachel, Chris, take it away.
Thanks, Dominic. Thanks all for having us tonight. My name is Chris Brunson, Director of Safety Projects and Programs. Just a little background on what our team does and a little background on 31st Street before Rachel gets started with the presentation. Our team deals primarily with projects that address Vision Zero priority geographies, including Vision Zero priority corridors and intersections. We are here tonight to present a safety project for 31st Street, which is a Vision Zero priority corridor. That means that corridor has a high rate of pedestrians killed or severely injured per mile, so making it one of the more dangerous corridors by crash history in all of Queens. In the last 5-year period of 2020 to 2024, the section we're looking at tonight, 36th Ave to Newtown Ave, there were 29 pedestrian injuries, 3 of those which were severe injuries, 23 bicycle injuries, 1 was severe, and 119 motor vehicle injuries, 2 of those were fatals and 7 were severe injuries. We also know that 31st Street is under the elevated tracks of the N and W, and with that, there are certain conditions that make the roadway less safe. Visibility is of primary concern. It's dark. The columns in the roadway obscure the different. It makes the visibility for different roadway users very challenging, so they can't see each other. In addition, the columns in the road, with the columns in the roadbed, the space from the column to the curb, or what we like to call the ambiguous space, becomes a grab bag of different types of activity, with double parking, driving, cycling, loading, and different pedestrian activity all happening at the same time, making it very unpredictable. And as one would expect, a very disorganized street is a very unpredictable street. And with this unpredictability, this helps to facilitate crashes. So we're here tonight to present a proposal for 31st Street that organizes the street to address the safety as well as expand the mobility options for the users of 31st Street. So with that, Rachel will give the presentation and then we'll take your questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry, pull this up. All right. Can everyone see this? Awesome. Okay, so thanks all for having us today, and thanks, Chris, for the introduction. So as Chris started, my name is Rachel. I'm part of a team at NYC DOT called Research, Implementation, and Safety. And what we focus on, as Chris said, is safety. So we look at the crash data across the 5 boroughs and focus on locations in the city with the highest number of crashes, particularly severe crashes, and say, what can we do here to make it safer? So today we're talking about 31st Street between 36th Ave and Newtown Ave. So shown here on the map, you can see the project limits on the southern end, 36th Ave, all the way up to Newtown on the northern end. As Chris said, it's a Vision Zero priority corridor, and 31st is in a Vision Zero priority area. It's also under the elevated structure of the NW trains with columns in the roadbed. There's more industrial land use down on the southern end, closer to 36th Ave, and as you move north on 31st, it gets more commercial and residential. There are many nearby schools, senior centers, and community centers in the area, and parts of the corridor are in both Tier 1 and Tier 2 priority investment areas. So there's been a lot of work happening in this area over the last number of years that we did want to mention. In 2017, concrete bus bulbs were added on 31st Street at 39th Avenue, 36th Avenue, and Broadway. You can see in the top right-hand photo, the bus bulbs at Broadway. In early 2020, there was a public workshop about expanding the Astoria bike network and the proposed protected bike lanes on 31st Street in each direction as an option, in addition to Crescent Street, which was implemented later that year and into the following year. In September 2023, there was a public workshop about the bike network and public realm planning for 31st Ave. And in summer and fall 2024, daylighting treatments were installed on Broadway from 21st Street to Steinway. In terms of future work, as many of you, I'm sure you know, there's an ongoing bike and public realm project on 31st Ave with a bike boulevard and public realm improvements. And you can see in the bottom right-hand photo, the protected bike lanes on 31st Ave. Last year, the team completed Vernon Boulevard up to 31st Street, and the upcoming portion is 31st Street to 51st Street. And the Western Queens Street Safety Plan, this was a report published in springtime 2024 by multiple elected officials, Tiffany Caban, Zoran Mamdani, Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, and Kristen Gonzalez. And our safety proposal on 31st Street, along with DOT's Vision Zero work, the expansion of the bike network in Astoria, and previous transit work on the corridor, align with the 7 goals that are outlined in this report. I listed them here. I'm just going to read through them. The goals are to improve bike infrastructure and design, to improve pedestrian infrastructure and design, universal daylighting, reimagine traffic enforcement, slow cars and disincentivize heavy vehicles, make the MTA excellent, reliable, and accessible, and safe and sustainable e-micromobility. And this report also requests a north to south bike connection and identifies 31st Street as a potential corridor through the neighborhood. So let's talk about the safety data on this portion of 31st Street. Chris already alluded to this, but as mentioned earlier, 31st Street is a Vision Zero priority corridor in a Vision Zero priority area. So if you look at the injury summary table on the top left, outlined in red, you can see that there were 178 total injuries over a 5-year period. The most recent 5-year period of data we have from 2020 to 2024. And of those total injuries, 13 were severe, which you can see in the column all the way on the right, which is labeled KSI. That stands for persons killed or severely injured. And this is the internal measure that we use at DOT to focus on severe crashes in order to target our resources. So of those 13 severe injuries, if you move up the column, you can see that 3 of them were pedestrian injuries, 1 was a cyclist, and 9 were motor vehicle occupants. And if we look at some of the causes of the injuries below, nearly 30% were caused by rear end crashes. More than 20% were caused by right angle crashes, which are also known as T-bone crashes. There were multiple sideswipe crashes, often due to this ambiguous space between the column and the curb. There were nearly 15 KSI, or people killed or severely injured, per mile, which puts this section of 31st Street in the top 10% of streets in Queens for severe injuries. And as you can see on the map, severe injuries and fatalities are spread out along the corridor in the orange bubbles and the red bubbles. If we're looking at pedestrian injuries, more than 30% were caused by left turn crashes when drivers fail to yield to pedestrians in a crosswalk. And cyclist injuries, there were multiple instances of cyclists getting doored. So when a cyclist is hit by a door and someone is getting out of their vehicle. So if we're looking at what 31st Street looks like now, here's a cross section of the existing conditions. So it's a pretty wide street, 60 feet wide. There is one full-time travel lane in each direction available for vehicles. There's this ambiguous space between the column and the curb, which if you can see on the right-hand side, the cyclist is biking in next to a parked car. And as mentioned earlier, there were capital bus bulbs installed at 36th Avenue and Broadway in 2017. So what is going on here on 31st Street? So there are a number of issues on the corridor. One of these issues is double parking and vehicular conflicts. So there's a lot of double parking and stopping on 31st, particularly between the columns and the curbs, which you can see circled in this photo. And this double parking can lead to unpredictable vehicle movements. So when vehicles are stopping in this ambiguous space between the column and the curb, and then driving out into the travel lane, that makes it unpredictable for everyone using the road. So other drivers, as well as pedestrians and cyclists. Another issue on this corridor is visibility issues due to the columns. So you might be able to see or might not. There's a pedestrian standing behind this column waiting to cross the street. There's a lack of bike facilities. You can see both of the cyclists in these photos are just biking along next to the vehicles. And there are long pedestrian crossing distances. So as mentioned, it's 60 feet wide, which is a long way to cross, but especially if you're, just like in this photo, pushing a stroller or might have limited mobility. So what are we proposing to do here? This is a cross section showing the existing conditions on the top and our proposal on the bottom. So we'll show aerial views of what this will look like over the next few slides. So the first is to move the curbside parking adjacent to the columns, kind of in line with the columns, to define this space between the columns and the curb. Next is to install protected bike lanes on the curb in the northbound and southbound directions, as seen in the green in the bottom. Next is to install painted pedestrian refuge islands at the intersections where feasible to shorten crossing distances and improve pedestrian visibility, which we'll see on the aerials in a few slides. Install vertical elements to encourage vehicles to make slower and safer turns and to yield to pedestrians and cyclists. And then one extra element is that we'll be resurfacing this corridor this summer before implementing the proposal. So how does this fit into the Astoria Bike Network? So this proposal will provide an important north-south bike connection to existing bike infrastructure in Astoria. So there will be connections to 36th Ave, 34th Ave, and 31st Ave bike lanes. As mentioned earlier, the ongoing Bike and Public Realm project of a bike boulevard and public realm improvements on 31st Avenue. There has been extensive outreach and planning in CB1 for this, including workshops, an online survey, and a merchant survey. As mentioned earlier, Vernon Boulevard to 31st Street was completed in 2024, and the upcoming portion, as highlighted on the map here in purple, is 31st Street to 51st Street. And we did record bike volumes on portions of 31st Street last spring and collected counts as an example of an average of 104 cyclists who were riding on 31st between 30th Ave and Broadway in a 12-hour period. So we also wanted to touch on protected bike lane safety. In 2022, DOT released a report called Pedestrian Safety and Older New Yorkers, and this study analyzed the impact of protected bike lanes on safety for roadway users. And it showed that protected bike lane designs are proven to calm traffic and improve safety for all roadway users, so pedestrians, cyclists, motor vehicle users. It also found that safety improvements associated with protected bike lanes are the most impactful for the most vulnerable roadway users. So if we look at some of the data here, the impacts on all roadway users, so again, motor vehicle, occupants, cyclists, pedestrians, are nearly a 15% injury reduction and 16% KSI, or severe injury reduction. If we look just at pedestrians, that's nearly an 18% overall injury reduction and nearly a 30% severe injury reduction. And if we look at just senior pedestrians, some of our most vulnerable street users, there was a 22% injury reduction and nearly a 40% severe injury reduction. So here's an aerial view of a typical block, what a typical block, the design will look like on 31st Street. So you can see in green along 31st Street, if you can see my mouse here, the protected bike lane calms traffic, organizes the roadway. It provides increased visibility of cyclists and pedestrians for turning vehicles. Next to the bike lane is floating parking, which defines the space and organizes the roadway. Also, if you can see the beige kind of shapes in the intersections, those are painted pedestrian islands, which shorten crossing distances, improve pedestrian visibility, and encourage slower and safer turns. And this channelization pointed out in the top left, which is the striping on the roadway, allows access to fire hydrants, the curb, and permits all FDNY turns. And here's an aerial view of what intersections at 36th Avenue and Broadway will look like with the existing bus bulbs. So you can see these like bump outs at the approaches of both of the intersections. And as part of the MTA Queens bus network redesign, the Q102 bus will no longer run on 31st Street north of 36th Avenue. So these existing bus bulbs will now function as curb extensions. So we'll have a raised protected bike lane over the existing concrete curb extensions at these two intersections. And there will be markings and signage on the curb extensions to encourage safe streets and cyclists yielding to pedestrians in shared zones. So on the one, in terms of parking, turn calming, and daylighting, on this 1 mile corridor, each block was evaluated to determine parking feasibility. And through this evaluation, there is a net repurposing of around 85 spots, which may change based on the final design. So there are a number of reasons for this repurposed parking. The majority of it is for visibility and to increase safety for all road users, which is a typical part of protected bike lane designs. So as seen in the photos below, protected bike lanes do repurpose parking at some locations and introduce daylighting measures along the corridor to improve visibility and safety and address left turn and right angle crashes. So these daylighting measures improve visibility for all users at intersections. You can see the bottom left photo with the quick curb kind of highlighted in red instead of a car parked there. They create shorter and safer pedestrian crossing distances. And in the bottom middle photo, you can see the painted pedestrian island in the crosswalk as pedestrian refuge space. They encourage slower and safer vehicle turns and yielding to cyclists and pedestrians around these painted islands and delineators. And in addition, daylighting allows for improved visibility at driveway locations, as shown in the bottom right photo. And additionally, some parking is repurposed due to the location of the columns in the road. So the columns currently are in this ambiguous space that we discussed. They obviously cannot be moved. So when we add the floating parking next to the protected bike lane, vehicles are now adjacent to, kind of in line with the columns, as opposed to between the column and the curb. So the columns now act as barriers between the vehicles parked there, which cause some spots to be repurposed on each block. And here's an example of proposed conditions on one of our projects on White Plains Road and Burke Ave in the Bronx. You can see on the right-hand side the green protected bike lane, which calms traffic, organizes the roadway, provides increased visibility of cyclists and pedestrians for turning vehicles. Next to it, you can see the parked cars in the floating parking, which defines the space and organizes the roadway. And in the bottom, you can see the painted pedestrian islands, which shorten crossing distances, improve pedestrian visibility, and encourage slower and safer turns. So overall, these project benefits, they organize the roadway and clarify vehicle movements underneath the elevated subway. The proposal provides slower and safer turns, reduces conflicts, and improves visibility among drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians. Reduces speeding and vehicle conflicts on 31st Street. It increases pedestrian visibility and safety. The protected bike lane calms traffic, shortens pedestrian crossing distances, and organizes the roadway, providing safety for all roadway users. and provides safer and more convenient bicycle travel and expands the protected bike lane network in Queens. So thank you so much for listening. We'd be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, so hello, this is Dominic. Put up your hand if you're have questions to ask committee members. And Rachel, that is an amazing presentation.
Thanks so much.
That's an amazing presentation. Bobby.
Thank you. Yeah, I second that. That was a great presentation, and also great to see the conditions in very similar places in the White Plains Road. It's helpful.
Right.
I was curious if any of the bike lane stretches would be getting physical, like hardening or protections along the corridor if the entire bike lane is going to be curbside. Obviously, with the exceptions for spots around fire department connections and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, so for parking protected bike lanes, we typically start off with just the painted barrier, the buffer. We don't usually put physical barriers in between the parallel park cars and the bike lane. However, if we had issues with double parking or intrusions into the bike lane, consistent intrusions into the bike lane, we would explore that. But we typically use the parked cars as the physical barrier between the travel lane and the cyclists.
Okay, thank you. And my follow-up to that would just be, if biking is going to get more convenient and safe, I would expect an increase in bikes. Do we have any plans for additional bike racks and things like that to store bikes along the corridor?
Yeah, that's something we're exploring with the design. One of the key features of this design is that we're really focusing on keeping that 11-foot clear in the event that emergency vehicles need to get to the curb have curb access. So you have that 8-foot bike lane and the 3-foot buffer. So that's DSNY compliant with their normal street sweeping equipment, but also an emergency vehicle could travel down that and have that access. And so that's just something that we've built into the design.
Awesome. Thank you.
Who's calling on people? Dominic, are you taking account of
Sorry,
who's
I
next?
thought that I was unmuted. Adam, please. And then you, and then Nas.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to echo again, this is going to be a great change, and going to make this street so much more coherent and easy to kind of follow where people are supposed to be. My question about it was kind of about, maybe I missed this, but about the bounds of this project. What's the thought on, especially on the southern side, feels like this would be a great route to kind of get down toward Queens Plaza, but it seems to fall a little short of connecting there. What's the thought on like where this ends, north and south?
Yeah, so our focus here is really to kind of frame 31st Ave and then 34th. We're trying to plug into the east-west first, and then look at an expanded scope beyond that in the future. And so we just felt like we wanted to kind of get the heart of the activity here to kind of lay the foundation for the north-south in the network. CB1's getting a lot of resources this year from DOT. We got 51st, we have this Northern Boulevard project, 31st Ave, 31st Street. Finite resources, and so we wanted to just kind of focus on like the heart of the kind of the where we could get the most commercial connections east west, biggest bang for our buck in 2025, and that's what we're focusing on.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I would say just if these bike lanes are kind of going to end at a certain point, I think a weak point in general of the design of bike lanes in New York that I find is that they sometimes just end and there's not a clear idea of where to go next. So,
Right.
For example, just if there's a painted area with an arrow kind of indicating that the protected routes are going to turn at some point or anything like that at both ends of this, at least until hopefully it does one day extend, it would be really appreciated.
Okay, it's noted. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And just my other comment was going to be that these painted parking areas, pedestrian islands, probably will be parking areas if they're not hardened in some way. So I know in some places we have the columns, but any place you're able to drop a a boulder or something like that, or a planter, would be much appreciated to keep those spaces.
Yeah, we usually start with the plastic delineators, but again, if we have issues, we'll do our best to put other elements in there. So we're not blocking the pedestrian right of way, but we can discourage other vehicles from standing or parking in those locations.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, before we go to you, Chris, Adam's absolutely right. You'll just come to a wall coming southbound at 36th Ave, and the Queensboro Bridge is so close, 4 avenues south of there, that it's almost a no-brainer to consider to keep it moving. I know it changes from a predominantly residential to a mixed-use zone,
Yeah.
which I live in, but it's an absolute no-brainer to do some type of protected bike lane continuing south. So,
Well, if the TC or the board wants to send us that recommendation in writing, we will always take that kind of recommendation from the board.
sorry, what's a TC?
Sorry, Transportation Committee, is that what you guys are called or no?
Thank you.
That's us.
Okay.
So I've heard of that.
Sorry, I was using the local, I thought that was like the local lingo. Is that, you guys don't use that
Too
jargon?
Too cool
TC?
for us, Chris.
All right.
We
Might be
know
exclusive to DOT.
we knew that before we invited you. So that we will discuss that and hopefully get that sent. So thanks for that. You?
Thank you. Thanks, DOT, for very cool presentation. I have a couple questions. First, what does this mean for 33rd Street? Because I think I've heard previously that DOT had been looking at 33rd. I live on Crescent Street, which was reduced from 2 lanes to 1, and it's been a big improvement in my day-to-day lives, my day-to-day life. And I see on 33rd, there's a lot of speeding, a lot of crashes, similar to Crescent before the changes. So I'm curious if this has any impact on that.
Impact in what sense?
Because I had heard that it may get may get a similar treatment where we
To
take away
Crescent.
one travel lane for a two-way protected bike lane, something like that.
Yeah, this doesn't preclude any improvements on 33rd Street. This is the Vision Zero priority corridor. We are focusing on this bike lane, a north-south bike lane that is two-way is needed in this network. As the Western Queens safety plan had requested and pointed out, and 31st being a two-way street, it does make the bike connections easier than looking at bike connections on 33rd Street, because then you have to find another one-way pair, another street to also potentially. I mean, I guess in the network, the larger network, Crescent and 33rd operate in that fashion. However, that's for that's for cars, that in a sense that those are a pair, since they're so far away from each other, for cyclists to see them as a proper one-way pair. So it doesn't preclude, I guess, long story short, it doesn't preclude any improvements on 33rd Street, but for a very efficient two-way connection north and south, 31st Street is the best from Northern Boulevard all the way to 20th Ave in the network here.
And I'll also add that like what was mentioned in the presentation, that when we've heard from the Western Queen Street Safety Initiative from the local electeds, is that there's a big demand for north-south throughout this area, and as Chris said, it doesn't preclude that. And we do have other units, like our actual bikes units, that do look at expanding the network throughout the area. So that's definitely something we can bring to them that people want to see. So yeah, it's definitely something we can take back to our internal teams, because it wouldn't
Okay,
have to
thank
end
you.
with just this connection.
Got it. Thank you. Question about loading zones. So I live on Crescent, and I think one of the reasons that Crescent does work is because there's a lot of curb cuts. I don't see many loading zones, but there are a lot of curb cuts for driveways so that people can pull into the curb cuts. Are there plans to add actual loading zones on 31st? Because otherwise, I think cars are just going to park in the bike lane.
Yes. So for all of our street improvement projects that are corridors like this one, we always develop a corridor loading zone plan with our parking unit. We don't usually come to the board with that loading plan as part of the proposal because we can't be too prescriptive. We work with our parking unit, they come up with some ideas, and then what we usually do, and this is what we did on Queens Boulevard. I know this is out of your guys' jurisdiction, but on Queens Boulevard that we implemented last year, we went to the board, gave the proposal, and then working with QBCO, Queensborough Commissioner's Office, we went out, we took our proposal, we talked to the businesses and figured out their delivery needs. So that's something we plan to do here too. We understand that loading is essential for businesses, and we need to make sure that we're getting the right regulations for the businesses so they can still operate, do their thing, and they're not blocking the bike lane, they're not blocking the travel lane, but they can still get those goods and services in and out of their businesses.
That's great to hear. Thank you. And just one last comment. I'd second Adam's comment about north of Newtown, especially around the Queens Story Boulevard station, because everyone knows that's very chaotic. So if
Right.
there's a way that we could expand that sometime in the future, I think it would be much appreciated by the community.
Okay. Thank you.
Right across the Astoria, the Grand Central, the Astoria Boulevard. Nas?
Thanks. Yeah, I think the update is great. I feel like I've been waiting 30 years for it. It's way better organized now per the plans. Just to jump off a little bit or to add on to Hugh's point, and looks like similar to Elizabeth's point in the chat, which I was going to bring up anyway, is yeah, so it's a pretty dynamic area. Obviously, loading zones are like a really key piece of the puzzle. So I would just emphasize that, like, yeah, realistically, there's going to be a ton of commercial drop-offs, which actually are usually the most disruptive double parking situations, because aside from the fact that 53-foot trailers should not be in the city and probably not on this route, they rarely can get in between the columns, let alone, currently curbside, they almost always can't make it. So I would say, just as an example, like Euro Markets on 31st Street, obviously it's a market, they get tons of deliveries daily. Like, if I would say that those are definitely areas where you'd want to look at having, at least during business hours, commercial only. And then, okay, overnight it can be public parking, because otherwise those are just going to become public parking all day. And then you kind of don't solve the problem with the commercial loading, which is a big issue. And similarly, like, yeah, realistically, a lot of pickups are happening at all the stops, all the subway stops. I kind of wish this was going all the way north to the Ditmars area, because like the Ditmars area is a super chaotic passenger pickup area for similar reasons as the rest of the strip. So I think the parking unit is actually really key in terms of this particular project, just because of how dynamic the use is. And realistically, like, yeah, there's a lot of need for very short-term parking for whether it's commercial loading reasons or, passenger pickup reasons. And then I think the last thing I would add is, yeah, the columns, I think it's really good that they are acting as the parking barriers in this case. I just think that, and I guess maybe a few of the intersections are going to be different, but like really key is going to be like the turning visibility and like the turning limitations on sections where like you don't naturally have that, or you don't have that existing kind of bus stop build out. That I guess now is just going to become extended curb space. So like, that's all I would add. And yeah, thanks.
It seems that now you do intend to put curb extension type of raised concrete on every north-south turn off of 31st Street.
No,
Because when you showed that typical,
well, we're using those examples at Broadway and 36th.
So,
Those are existing bus bulbs because the bus isn't stopping and it's not going to be
so,
stopping at Broadway anymore.
so can you put up again, Rachel, the typical non-30, the
Yeah,
35th,
we're
31st?
repurposing that bus bulb. Now it's a raised bike lane.
You know,
So
and I
yeah,
understand, but I just
yeah.
want to see how, because what happens a lot
There's
is the
there's painted space. Yeah.
right hand turning cars decide which side of the column to go to. And I thought
Yep.
from your earlier drawing, which I'd like you to put back up if you could, that you were restricting the cars from making a 90-degree right hand turn off of 31st in both directions, but maybe you're not. So
It'll be painted space, but that's at
so right,
Broadway.
so
That's the
right there, north or south off of 31st. In other words, you're on 31st and you're coming off of it. You
Mhm.
can only go to the left of the columns.
Yeah, but that's existing concrete.
Can you show the other one?
Mhm. Oh,
'Cause that's a great
there you
implement.
go.
So here
That's
you have
painted
it
space.
painted. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it's a
But
shame. It's a real shame that you don't have a curb extension to make the right-hand turning cars in both directions have to keep the column on their right.
those painted spaces could be upgraded to concrete in the future. Um,
But yeah, well, what
but
we find pessimistically is
mhm.
a poor installation makes a good design bad. Do you know what I mean? People be
Mhm.
running over it and also, so why wouldn't you consider to just concrete that? When I saw the other layout, I assumed you had new concrete, but now you're saying you've got absolutely no new concrete in the whole design, Chris?
Not this year.
That's
Yeah.
a real shame. That's a real
Yeah.
shame.
Yeah, and Dominic, I think it's important to remember we always do try to come back to existing painted spaces and try to build them out. That's what we're gonna attempt to do in this quarter and what we're doing on Queens Boulevard. I mean, and just south of where this project is, we've already built some new bus boarding islands. I believe it's at 37th Avenue,
Yeah,
Chris.
37th Ave
Yeah.
was built last year. Also just a little inside baseball on that too. We're working with the MTA when we do concrete near MTA facilities such as these columns, like that island that we built at 37, those islands we built at 37th for the bus stop under the L last year. Uh, it's nearly a year of review back and forth with them because of they have this construction management oversight that they have to approve our drawings. And we wanted to move on this year. We wouldn't have had the time to get all that sign off because they have quite a queue of things that they're trying to review for us right now. So we are coming back. We're going back to Queens Boulevard, which we installed last year with just the painted, and we're going back with concrete islands. So uh, we do follow up on these things, Dominic. So
To be from where to
uh,
where?
Queens Boulevard,
From where to where?
from Roosevelt to Skillman, we're adding islands that were painted last year in Sunnyside section. We're adding
Skillman doesn't go to from that's parallel to Queens Boulevard.
it. It also meets right at the bridge there, right before
Oh,
Sunnyside
okay.
Yards. Yeah,
Okay. So Roosevelt to Skillman, so the west end.
yeah. The north side is starting to get islands this year. Maybe the south side if MTA will approve our review our drawings.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's
Backtracking. Oh,
but the
sorry.
seven train is in the middle of Queens Boulevard, and all these things we're talking about are kind of on the north side of Queens Boulevard.
Yeah, it just MTA review. It takes a lot longer to do that. So just that's a little in
Right.
the weeds, but it is a reality. We can't build these as of right, actually,
Yeah.
which is odd, you know.
Well, it's interesting because we had an MTA presentation not too long ago, and they were very hands-off, the snow removal and anything regarding pavements at anywhere, even at the base of their stairs. So they really shouldn't be able to have it both ways without a little questioning, Chris, if you don't mind me
Yeah.
saying so. They're
All right.
really right. I don't know if anyone
I
else
don't mind.
remembers, but we had MTA here with some elevators on 31st, and they were no to snow removal, and they were putting stair towers mid-block between 36th and 37th, and they didn't want to do a thing on the sidewalk. They left it to you. They said they need DOT approval. I'm kidding about
Well,
that.
I'll tell you this. Joe can back me up on this, but our team will keep on this project. We'll follow up with modifications. We'll do the work that it needs to take to make this a successful project. So we don't abandon our projects. So as long as we have support from the board and the community and everything, we'll follow up on these things. Okay.
Yeah,
Of course.
appreciate it.
And if we need to do any kind of coordinating with the MTA, we,
Yeah.
our team and Chris' team have a lot of experience with that already with
Yeah. It just
previous
takes a little
projects.
longer timeline.
With them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And before we move on, I also just want to backtrack a bit on what Nas was saying before about, loading zones and some of the hot spots in the area. Like we would definitely, look to the board and look to, all the local stakeholders to kind of point us in the right direction of what areas we should be focusing on in terms of loading zones and what areas you think might be, pinch points, whether it's, some of the train stations or the supermarkets or any kind of like other areas that we should, pay close attention to, especially after installation, if we need to make any kind of like loading zone or parking regulation changes there.
Well, that's a good question. Sorry, Brian, to delay you, but will all the adjusted parking spaces that are now outboard of the protected bike lanes be metered parking if they already were? Will they be, they're in it's pretty much commercial strip, so is it all metered parking?
There'll be a little bit of changes to the metered maybe, but we're still working with our parking unit on that. I think there were some small areas that might go metered that weren't before, but we don't have all the details on that yet.
Because I think we're all agreeing it's a short-term parking and it's probably beneficial to the sanity of the area, I guess. I think. So Brian?
Okay, sorry guys. So my concern, I guess it's kind of been addressed a little bit as far as like the loading zone with the businesses and stuff in the area. I'm experiencing it on my 31st Avenue location, which with getting deliveries and it's just become impossible. Like to be completely transparent, they're parking on the bike lane sometimes, and especially some of the other deliveries I see happening in the area, especially when people moving in and out. And on 31st Street, we have so many businesses, so many medical offices, law firms, all that type of stuff. Not only the small businesses are going to be affected, but that's just a huge concern with, kind of where we're going to park, where they're going to park, where they're going to unload and unload. So I feel that we need more of a plan before we could approve this, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and Joe and Jason can speak to this more, but what we did on Queens Boulevard before we implemented that project is we went door to door, talked to the businesses about their loading needs. I believe we would have a similar plan here, Joe, Jason. I'm not sure.
Yeah, of course we can. We would definitely have direct communication with any of this this businesses or stakeholders, and if we need to have a conversation outside of this, we can do that as well. I can put my own information in the chat if we need to have the discussion about that.
And Brian, Jason here, Deputy Borough Commissioner for the agency. Yeah, please keep in touch with us. Just to go back into the presentation, this is part of continued outreach. We had this conversation with local businesses back in several years ago, 2-3 years ago. And there was some land use changes that have happened. There's some things that we're looking to do, as Chris and the team were saying, for parking to accommodate those same businesses. So we haven't lost touch with folks. So if you have specific, 2 things I heard you mention, some concerns that you might have with loading on 31st Avenue. But let's also have a conversation simultaneously about other areas you feel that we should continue to look at. This is not a project that's been developed just this year. It's been developed over several years. We also mentioned, the merchant survey that was conducted here for this stretch as well. And those are things that are, they're going to continue to be touch points for us as we continue this outreach prior to anything happening. So we're still in an outreach phase. We'll continue working with you through this outreach phase. And as we approach implementation and after implementation, that's something that we'll continue to do. I think, I just like to mention the Queens Boulevard a little bit more in detail, just because, we've been working hand in glove with the business improvement district over there, and the MTA project, to your concern, Dominic, which is always one of my concerns, it did offset a lot of parking for businesses, and Chris and his team have done a great job, and we haven't announced this yet, but might as well share this good news here, because it's coming to CB2 that we're going to be restoring parking spaces. So we've gotten better at becoming more nimble, at using the tools that we have in the toolbox to restore a parking that's being repurposed, even if it's in the temporary, as we continue to identify more permanent restoration of parking if it's feasible. But with the stanchions here, there are a lot of challenges, but at the same time I think we're getting a lot of benefits with building out a lot of these intersections. You get those that build out is something that this board and this transportation committee has prioritized a lot through its messaging to us, not only through these meetings, but also, through its capital requests, and other things that we field through our longer term conversations. So we're trying to hit the nail on the head, but at the same time, it's a moving target. And to Chris's point, why we're framing this, we think we can be intentional with moving forward with implementation as we continue that outreach to other areas, as we talk to businesses, so we can continue to be intentional about what their loading needs are and what that access is. So I think somebody had a question, about extending this, but this is also our effort into making sure, because we heard it loud and clearly this was moving a little bit too fast years ago, and so we took some time. Right, we developed other projects. 31st Avenue is a really transformative project, and it hasn't been easy, but at the same time there's been a lot of support for that project, and we actually had an implementation meeting today, and there's some things we're going to go back to, Brian, that we might have not got right the first time. So some of those things, there might be things that will have a positive impact on you. So we never walk away, and we want to make sure that we don't walk away from whatever concern you might have for 31st Avenue, and then we'll continue walking with you shoulder to shoulder and the rest of the folks here, north and south, whatever the board feels is best with this project, and as we identify safety needs with you guys.
Okay, thank you. If you could drop your contact information in the chat, I'll appreciate that, so I can reach out to you offline.
You got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Jason, and Chris, I wonder, but I hope and I expect, but I'm asking that you also consider Crescent Street changes over the last 5 years transformative.
Oh yeah, of course. I think, the only reason why I think I say transformative when it comes to 31st Avenue, 31st Avenue has project features that haven't been combined into one street improvement project like that.
Yeah.
You guys got something that the city's never really gotten before, and 34th Avenue doesn't really have those treatments in some way, shape, or form. And, through my work there, people called that the gold star, but in my mind, 31st Avenue's a gold star because even though we haven't finished the first phase, it's going to incorporate, some features of 34th Avenue in Jackson Heights with the combination of what we've done that is transformative in the first phase of 31st Avenue, just west of Vernon Boulevard. So I don't know, apples to oranges, but at the same time, they're both great projects that have, really changed hearts and minds and give folks, a different feel for their neighborhoods.
Yeah, no, understood. And I know that Crescent is purely a two-way bike lane, but please know that for users and pedestrians, it really is transformative. So thank you. Kenyella?
Hi all, DOT, thank you for the wonderful presentation. My question is, and maybe this is not a question for you guys, maybe this is a concern of safety, is when you're driving down 31st Street, there is a sign there that says you can't turn between a certain hour. Like you can't make like if you're driving, let's say, down from Astoria Boulevard to 36th Avenue, you can't make that left turn during a certain hour, like from 7 to 9 a.m. But I see cars making that turn. So by you guys, making the street a little smaller, I think that's going to cause a problem for traffic flow. And I don't know if it's you guys, or should we address that with the police department, that there is a sign there that says you can't turn between certain hours, but cars make that turn anyway. And that's going to slow down traffic. Is it some type of enforcement that maybe transportation can work with the police department where they give people tickets that are making those turns during those hours that we shouldn't?
So I was just going to jump in just because we're actively already working with the police department on some of these concerns. One example, that Joe and I are working on a little bit further north of here is PS 85 on 31st Street proper. That school is heavily populated. We just saw Annex that was open there, and so there's an increased student population there, and so the PTA hit us up beginning of fall time. And this is part of our larger outreach, that we've been doing since we first started talking about 31st Avenue and the bike lane years ago. When we go offline with the board, we still continue walking up and down these streets, knocking on doors and talking to folks about things. And in that instance of PS 85, I'm working with the PTA and Senator Gianaris's office. We're able to open up specific requests that the parents had and the faculty. But in the meantime, right now, real time, every day we're working with the precinct and their traffic sergeant to monitor the intersections. As before we put in the new signage that has been approved, there's a new school slow zone that's been approved for PS 85 on 31st Street. And so prior to installing that slow zone, we work with enforcement to ensure that folks that are coming to the school understand the existing regs, but then work with them to acclimate into the new regs. And as we move into the summer, we're going to continue working with the police department as we install those new regulations, and then we'll come back again in the fall time just before to remind the parents as well as the drivers about the new condition. So that's something that we can continue to do on all these other intersections. I'm aware of those signs and the temporary, the times that we restrict turns. Another thing that we do, not only are we working day to day with the precincts, and we also meet with the board and the precinct monthly at the district service cabinet, so we can continue talking about this with Florence and the interagency task force that we usually have and have discussions. But we also meet with the precinct prior to implementing the project. And we talk about all your feedback here, so we'll have this conversation about those specific intersections and what the plan should be. One, under the new existing, right before we'll have a conversation with them about making sure we're vigilant now and making sure that's part of the day and the nighttime rotations for their traffic officers, but also ensuring that under the new condition, the one that we've shown here today within the proposal, is something that their officers will continue to work on to make sure that there's continuous flow as folks acclimate to these new conditions. That's something that we have to work with our police department on. And for folks here who are involved in community precinct councils, please have those discussions in those forums too, because within those forums, there's follow-ups that those officers have with us. Those meetings are for crime, of course, but also feel free to bring your transportation matters, enforcement matters specifically to the 114th precinct, because they're coming back to us. Every request that they make comes across my desk. I sign those letters, and they're part of the ongoing conversations that Joe has with them every single day. So we got our finger to the pulse with some of this, but when we were having a conversation about this project, Canelo, the signage, from my perspective, didn't really come up. So I appreciate you mentioning that, and we'll make sure that's heavily intertwined into that 114th precinct follow up and on the project conversation we'll have with them.
Thank you, Jason.
Evie, welcome back.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for the presentation again. I live 2 blocks away from 31st Street, so it's good to see some safety improvements. I guess my question is, when are we going to kind of really know what the full plan looks like, even if it's in draft form? We got little snippets of it. You might have mentioned that. I just wasn't really sure, so curious about the timeline. And then and I know you've talked to some businesses. It sounded like that was a couple years ago. So what's your timeline for the outreach to the businesses, or meeting with small business groups as well? Because there are, I think, a few of them that kind of intersect with this area. And then third, what about King of Souvlaki? Just wondering what's going to happen to them.
That came up. Yeah, I'll answer from the back, from the last question. Souvlaki up. Borough President also had an interest in ensuring that we preserve Souvlaki there too. So we're going to go out and have a conversation, and make sure that whatever we do, that we're providing a space. The specific concern, that the Borough President's rep had was that if we do make changes here, are we going to accommodate them in the roadway space, in other areas? And we would want to have that conversation and involve our interagency partners to make sure that we're being mindful of that. So that's something that's going to happen here. And we'll continue to keep you guys updated. This isn't the last time we're coming to the Transportation Committee before summer. So we'll make sure that's part of our recurring updates to you guys, as we will with 51st Street too, because the board had some questions about speaking what we were doing, speaking with the schools, Woodside houses. So we want to continue to keep you guys updated as part of those conversations. Then just to go back to the second question, Evie, about the businesses, if you have we have that Rolodex, right, from that merchant survey. That's where we're going to be going, to speak with, right? Of course, things have changed over time. But and of course there's those business advocacy groups and bids that overlap with this area. So if you have a list that you want to share with us, just so we make sure that it checks off with ours, we'd love to see that. We're going to continue, and as far as timeline for outreach, we're going to continue moving up and down the corridor, talking to folks. Elected officials had provided us, with some recommendations. We also have some follow-up calls directly with some specific elected officials because they weren't able to attend the briefing themselves. And so we'll learn a little bit more about that list, because it's going to grow if it doesn't overlap with our existing list of businesses that we spoke to in the past. And then I'll let Chris and Joe and Rachel take the timeline for implementation and project. But I will help Chris in saying, that many of the times we show projects in phases, while much of the corridor mirrors exactly what you're seeing, the design will mirror much of the proposal of what you've seen here. Of course, land use changes, curb cuts, and access is something that we're going to have to learn a little bit more through outreach. And so that's why it might be difficult to show you a plan, because as Chris had said it, earlier, we like to let outreach dictate that plan. We have a plan, but the public really is at the heart in developing a lot of these RIS projects. But Chris, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's all
jump
right.
in.
So we're planning to implement this summer. As we had mentioned before, we're planning a resurfacing of this portion of the corridor in conjunction with the project, and that's not eligible until the new fiscal year. So this project can't start until after July. The resurfacing on 31st Street would be nighttime work, and so it allows that work to happen more efficiently. But there is, it takes a few weeks to do a resurfacing, and then after that, we usually expect markings of this kind of scope for about a mile to take about 2 months to get completely done. So there's multiple stages of that: the white lines, the green paint, the pedestrian space, the brown paint in the painted spaces, and then the vertical elements of the plastic delineators. What was the other question? Oh, just the whole design, the whole plan. So the snippets that we show here, we take an AutoCAD drawing that's, a digital drafting software, and we make them pretty for the presentations, and that's pretty time consuming. So we don't do that for the whole design. We take typical intersections such as 34th and 31st here, and then the other ones that have the bus bulbs, and that's going to be the template for the whole corridor. But we will, the parking loss, the parking repurposing that we present in the plan, that's a very detailed analysis on our end, and we try to be very accurate with that. But the loading zones, like I said before, the loading zone plan is probably the one that's the most technical, and that's something that we can't be prescriptive on that. We can have our ideas. We do have some ideas. We know some of these places that we expect loading to happen. But if we come out with a very prescriptive plan and then the businesses have different ideas, it just we have to do the work twice, and so it's just better we have our ideas, and we're gonna hit up the necessary businesses along here and develop that plan. But we can get you more details once that's developed.
Thank you.
So if I could just chime in, and thanks, Evie, for
Sure.
your questions, but just I have a realization that we have to move it on, but move along, but I just want to clarify that in reality, 31st Street with these columns at 11, 13 feet out makes it so significant. It makes it so easy to bump the parking out and put the bike lane. I mean, it's really easier than a street that didn't have that. And then Chris, when you mention loading zones, this is public street. It's not owned by the businesses. And if there are businesses that have been using the public street for months, years, decades, they're getting a potential unfair advantage to their competition that's paying valid property taxes on larger properties to keep their business in there within their property. So, you say you're going to go to the businesses and try to adjust loading zones, and there's a certain businesses along this corridor that have, many, many, many boxes and things predominantly in the sidewalk and not in the street. But, don't, it sounds like you're concerned about that. And I think if you look at it structurally and this is public land. It's not businesses. So I'm a little.
Yeah, I agree. It's a balance, though. It's just, and loading zones doesn't mean that the business owns that land. It's a condition of the metered parking zone, right?
Just
So
like
it's
the
right.
restaurants and possibly the souvlaki may be bumped out 5 to 8 feet away from the curb, and there has to be some coordination of pedestrians and cyclists. It's still manageable. The obvious move of the souvlaki is to move it out into what we're looking right there. You see that channelized
the floating parking, or
right.
Yeah, I mean we've seen this
That
on
should be
other
the loading zone.
corridors that have had protected bike lanes. The businesses, I mean these are very successful entrepreneurs. They know how to adapt to a changing environment, and they will, and the community will support it. We've seen that on other corridors. So, but as Jason, mentioned, we're gonna engage with it too. It's not just, we want to engage with the necessary stakeholders here. So,
Sure. But unlike bagel stores in Forest Hills that complain about customer parking, you've got more industrial uses here that may take advantage of the land for their use in possibly a not fully appropriate way. So, if as long as all this loading zones gets put out in the plane, as you look on the Rachel's drawing there, where the stripes are, it will work. There'll have to be coordination of the interface between pedestrians and bicycles and businesses.
Yeah, right. And to this point about businesses and where they're going to do their activity, we've noticed in our study of the corridor, there's a number of curb cuts that like maybe more than are legal, but there's a number of them, and curb cuts and driveways that businesses are parking in front of currently, and we would imagine that we would do a very similar thing to do their own business activity, but in the floating parking area, not in the bike lane.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks
So
so much, Chris and Rachel.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us. If you want to send any type of written support or anything, we would always appreciate that, especially if you want to see an expansion of this proposal north or south in the future. I feel like support from the local communities is always helpful in our efforts to implement safety projects. So we really appreciate all of your time. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to talk to the committee about that support and also a potential support about including concrete curb extensions wherever the brown painted curb is, because I think it may bring success where we may have a lot of stress and failure, maybe a relief, maybe a big stress relief.
Yeah,
So-
and one of the participants did mention that the agency came back and added those to Crescent. That was something that we came back and put concrete islands on Crescent after they were like at 34th Ave, I believe, and Crescent has one. There's some other locations I think now too. So, yep, that's something that we can have on our to-do list.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone. So
Thanks, RIS.
Thanks. We're going to take off. We'll be in touch though.
appreciate it. So we'll move right along to DOT presentation number 2 about, it'll be the DOT School Safety Unit, street improvement project to complement the construction of the new school at 5316 Northern Boulevard. Project will improve pedestrian crossings for students and discourage dangerous traffic maneuvers across Northern Boulevard. And that is Robbie Gomez, project lead of the school safety DOT, and Elena Lunyova, deputy director. So please take it away, Robbie and Elena.
Sure. Just a very brief intro. My name is Elena Leonova. I'm a deputy director of school safety, and our unit is tasked with redesigning dangerous streets next to schools and on the way on students' way to school. And we are here because of the new school that is going to open in 2025. With that, Robbie, please take it away.
Thanks, Elena. Just gonna share my screen here. Right. To confirm, does everybody see my screen? Right.
Yes.
Cool. Right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Robbie Gomez, a project manager at School Safety Unit. Today, I'm gonna present to you the Northern Boulevard school safety improvements from 51st Street to Broadway. So with school safety reviewing sites across the city, this section of Northern Boulevard stood out. It's a busy corridor with a lot of different users. And with a new school opening soon, it's important that we take a closer look at the current conditions and what's coming next. So this location has several factors that makes that make that it a priority for us. HS 472, with an expected enrollment of over 3,000 students, is scheduled to open this September. This is also designed through truck route, designated through truck route, meaning large vehicles regularly travel through the area. On top of that, this corridor serves 5 key bus routes, making it a vital piece of the city's transit network. DOT has been working closely with the community for nearly a decade to improve safety and mobility along Northern Boulevard. These efforts are rooted in consistent engagement and public feedback. In 2018, DOT held 3 public workshops to understand local concerns. The community highlighted key priorities like protected bike lanes, better bus service, and safer pedestrian crossings with features like medians and refuge islands. In 2020, DOT partnered with State Senator Ramos to hear directly from businesses along Northern Boulevard, ensuring their voices were part of the conversation. And in 2022, elected officials pushed for an expanded transit improvements, including dedicated bus lanes and more reliable service. These ongoing priorities have continued to guide the work we do in the corridor. Building on that community input, DOT has delivered a series of targeted improvements along Northern Boulevard in recent years. In 2019, we made upgrades between Newtown Road and Broadway, adding pedestrian islands, curb extensions, expanding an existing triangle to create safer crossings. In 2021, we installed protected bike lanes from 41st Avenue to Broadway, giving cyclists dedicated space and helping reduce conflicts with moving traffic. In 2023, we introduced dedicated bus lanes from Broadway to 114th Street, helping to improve travel times and transit reliability. And most recently, DOT presented a street improvement project for 51st Street from Northern Boulevard to 31st Ave, which includes protected bike lanes, pedestrian islands, and a new bus boarding island. So as Chris mentioned a while ago, Vision Zero is a citywide multi-agency effort launched in 2014 with one goal: to eliminate traffic fatalities and serious injuries across New York City. The city continues to invest in street redesigns, safer signals, and public education to make our streets safer for everyone. In 2023, DOT released the updated Borough Pedestrian Safety Action Plans. These plans identify priority intersections, corridors, and areas, focusing improvements where they're needed most. Northern Boulevard is identified as both a priority corridor and a priority area, highlighting this corridor as an area in need of targeted safety improvements. In this stretch of Northern Boulevard, there have been a total of 86 reported injuries from 2019 to 2023, including 2 serious injuries. 34% of those injuries involve pedestrians and bicyclists, people who are most vulnerable in traffic. With HS 472 opening later this year, we expect to see more activity in the area, making safety improvements even more relevant. Now that we've looked at the safety data, let's take a closer look at what the street actually looks like today and what conditions are contributing to these patterns. This segment of Northern Boulevard is a two-way 70-foot wide street with 2 travel lanes and bike lanes in both directions. Northern Boulevard has numerous curb cuts or driveways along the north curb, which create potential conflict points between pedestrians, cyclists, and turning vehicles. The existing painted flush median, intended to accommodate left turn bays, creates a wide open field on the roadway. This design unintentionally encourages higher vehicle speeds and gives drivers a false sense of extra space, which can compromise safety. Uncontrolled left turns across multiple lanes create safety risks, especially when drivers turning into busy driveways. They have to cross several lanes, which increases the chances of conflicts with people walking or biking. In these situations, drivers are usually focused on finding a gap in traffic, not looking for people walking along or crossing the sidewalk. That shift in attention increases the likelihood of near misses or crashes involving pedestrians and cyclists. With more pedestrian activity expected in the area, it's important to address these types of turning movements to support a safer walking environment. And it's not just where left turns happen, but how they happen that creates added risk. When drivers make a left turn, they often build up speed over a longer distance, sometimes 30 feet or more, before crossing the sidewalk. This makes it harder for them to stop in time if someone is walking or biking across. This can be especially concerning near schools, where students may be crossing throughout the day, not just during arrival and dismissal. Right turns, on the other hand, are usually made at slower speeds and with a tighter turning radius. This tends to give drivers better visibility of people walking or biking and more time to yield. So while turning behavior is one part of a safety picture, the design of the crossings themselves plays an equally important role, especially for people walking. Crosswalks along the corridor are quite long, ranging from 70 feet to 88 feet. That's a long distance to get across, especially for older adults, children, or anyone who may need more time to cross. Currently, there are no pedestrian islands in place at these points of Northern Boulevard. That means people have to cross the full width of the street all at once, even as traffic continues to move around them. As activity along the corridor continues to grow, especially with the addition of the nearby high school, improving these crossings will crossings will help make the street more comfortable and safer for everyone walking through the area. Let's talk about how we're redesigning the section of Northern Boulevard to address these issues. Starting with the median and crossing improvements, we're replacing the painted median and left turn base with a raised concrete median and pedestrian refuge island. This gives people a safer place to pause while crossing the street and makes the road feel more organized. There are several key tangible benefits to adding a continuous concrete median along this block. It helps shorten crossing distances, making crossings easier and more comfortable, especially for students, families, and older adults. By removing mid-block left turns and U-turns, we can reduce sudden, unpredictable vehicle turns across multiple lanes of traffic that can lead to crashes. And with a new concrete median, the street feels narrower, which naturally encourages drivers to slow down, something that benefits everyone, especially in a school environment. We're also banning the low volume westbound left turn from Northern Boulevard to Woodside Ave. This lets us make room for the concrete median and pedestrian refuge island, which improving overall safety and at the intersection. With these planned changes, let's talk through alternative routes from Northern Boulevard onto Woodside Avenue. The most direct option for westbound drivers is a soft right onto Broadway, then the left turn on 51st, and straight onto Woodside Avenue. For drivers who miss that turn, they can loop back via Newtown Road, right on Broadway, right on 51st, and straight to reach Woodside Avenue. At peak hour, only 40 vehicles make the westbound left onto Woodside Avenue, so this is a low volume movement. We've conducted a rigorous traffic analysis on these intersections, and we're confident that these changes will not create any significant traffic impact. This slide shows how traffic will be rerouted to access the driveways along Northern Boulevard across the school. Most drivers will turn left onto 51st Street and loop back via Broadway to return to Northern Boulevard. Some businesses can also be accessed through an alternate driveway along Broadway. Another option is a soft right turn onto Broadway, then looping back via 55th Street and onto Northern Boulevard. Only about 50 vehicles are expected to follow this rerouting during busiest hour. We'll also adjust the signal timing to provide more green time for the protected eastbound left turn from Northern Boulevard onto 51st Street, supporting these rerouted movements. Together, these changes are part of a larger effort to create a safer, more predictable street, one that works better for everyone, whether you're walking, biking, taking the bus, or driving, especially with the high school opening and ongoing transit use. We're currently finalizing the design and are scheduled to present the project to CB2 on Monday, with implementation planned for the summer. Thank you, and now it's open for questions if you have any.
Thanks, Robbie. Adam, please.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Northern Boulevard is definitely intimidating as a pedestrian, and with the school there, it's very important that it's safer. Could we go back to the slide that has kind of the aerial view of the whole project?
Of course.
So recently, I think a different department at DOT, but came to show us the bike lane project on 51st Street, and a comment I brought up there was that there will be a bike lane coming down like southbound on 51st. People may want to make that, what would that be? That left turn then to go westbound on Northern Boulevard. And, this is just going to be a very long journey across the intersection, and there's no clear place to wait and make that to make that second crossing there. Additionally, this is kind of this like slip lane that is here on Woodside Avenue coming off of westbound traffic is often pretty much like a pretty scary thing to be walking through as a pedestrian. And you know, a lot of cars will be just kind of, as you said earlier, kind of looking at car traffic, not noticing pedestrians there. Um, I'm wondering if there's anything that can be addressed in this area to kind of resolve both of those things. You know, haven't done the traffic studies. Personally, in my experience as a pedestrian here, would love to have the slip lane just closed and repurposed as more usable space to kind of wait for cyclists and have a shorter crossing for pedestrians. But short of that, anything else that can kind of improve that situation for everyone there?
So we will coordinate with Chris's team. This is the team that presented earlier to see what can be done on with the southbound right turn. As to the slip lane, Robbie, do you recall if this was something?
So yeah, so we studied this area, and the we are still trying to get the volumes here because they're kind of high for the to eliminate the slip lane, because yeah, we actually wanted to close this slip lane too. But yeah, we're still trying to figure out if because yeah, there's still a high volume that uses or a lot of vehicles still use the slip lane right now. So we're not positive that we can actually close this for now, but yeah, we'll definitely look into it further if we can actually address the crossing issue.
We could reevaluate this again. I would say after, if you would like, after the school opens. It usually, I would say it probably will take about half a year for users of the street to adjust to such a big change in land use, and for people to figure out their commutes to the new school locations. And after that, we can see if volumes of vehicles using this slip lane changed, and it would allow us to close it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Is it maybe talking about two different things with volumes of people using the slip lane versus volumes of people making that turn? Is this, if you made them take this right turn by going into the main lane of traffic, is that just too tight of a turn or something that it's not feasible to require that?
Yes, right now it's quite a tight turn for vehicles to make this right turn. That's why this slip lane was put in place. But yeah, we'll definitely have to reevaluate after the school opens for sure.
Okay, yeah, understood. Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll also add real quick that we're, looking at the intersection for leading pedestrian intervals as well as part of the other project that you mentioned for 51st Street.
Joe, you're saying that LPIs may solve some of the problem.
Yeah, it'll help to ease some of the concerns with the intersection, but we can definitely explore like any other, request for it as well. Not saying that that's the one solution for it, but I'm just saying that, it's something else we can explore as well.
Well, I think we are, Robbie, aren't we
Yeah.
adding? Yes, we are. Yeah.
We are adding LPIs because of the because we're eliminating the dedicated left turn, so we might be able to add more green time for pedestrians too.
Are you also adding, or are there already LPIs on a Broadway Northern Boulevard intersection?
At Broadway Northern, I believe that's an actual Barnes dance right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a whole dedicated pedestrian phase in all directions.
Thanks.
And we
Nas?
already have the LPI on the 51st, I think, and we'll reevaluate further.
Nas?
Hey, yeah, thanks for the presentation. Yeah, the concrete island is great, obviously very needed. I'm sure McDonald's is going to be very happy with the new high school. And I think I may have missed this on your drawings, but Is this sample photo from Lenox Ave representative of the width of what this one's going to be? Just because it is going to be throngs of students coming out kind of at the same times, like in terms of packing as many people as possible onto it with it being safe. Because I know sometimes these concrete islands are like super narrow. Maybe they're only like 4 or 5 feet deep, but yeah, a bigger island is obviously going to be very conducive to the sheer number of kids that would be letting out of the school at any given time.
This
Yes.
one, yeah, go ahead.
So it's gonna be 9 to 10 feet wide. So it's Linux is I think around 11 to 12, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, roughly almost the same width.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think that looks good. It's a great idea because yeah, northern, especially there, yeah, super chaotic with the even with the turn bays, which are technically an improvement, but I think the island is great and a perfect use case for it.
Daniela, please.
Hi. I think the left turn on 51st Street, I'd make that turn to go to Best Buy. So I like that turn. But anyway, I think it's great that you guys are looking at the safety for children. But are you anticipating the traffic that the parents are going to be making in that area? Like when they block the the bike lanes, and all the parents that's going to be dropping off their kids in the morning, picking up their kids in the afternoon. Are you anticipating a lot of traffic in that area?
We'll see how it goes. Yes and no, because sometimes we do see a lot of vehicular pickups and drop-offs in Queens. At the same time, this is a high school, and high school students in New York City tend to overwhelmingly take buses and subways, and they prefer not to travel with their parents pretty often. So we'll see. It's really hard to predict with this one.
Yeah, I'm just asking because I have a high school student and I drop her off.
Mm.
So in that area, it's going to be very hard on Northern Boulevard when you have a lot of parents dropping their kids off. So that might be something you may have to, look into when it happens, when you open up the school in September.
Canella, what we'll do is and this is something that we kind of do with the Department of Education when we're working with SCA, School Construction Authority, to develop plans, is we do have access to where these kids are coming from. And like Elena said, and this was similar to a high school that we just opened 2 years ago after we did the Northern Boulevard project. After talking with them, we found that the majority of the students were going to be taking public transportation, and that only a handful of kids were going to be taking busing, and those buses were going to be accessing a different entrance exit because of the need. So that's something that we'll make sure that we can take back and we can get a response to the transportation committee on. But I tend to agree with Elena. The majority of the kids that are taking public transportation to these schools, and that's one of the reasons why this school was this site was chosen. You guys would probably know more than I would, and on CB2 would actually know more than I would. But after doing work in siting schools with that board, while my time in the council, I was a part of these conversations early on, and this site was chosen because of its proximity to the train station and to the bus, and the bus lane, something that community board had supported in an effort to make sure that the kids were getting here with the new school site. So a lot of folks have put thought into this as the school was developed over, nearly for over 5 years actually. But hear you loud and clearly on that, and we'll make sure we get that intel and provide it back to you guys.
Thank you, Jason.
No problem.
Thank you, Jason. And also, if the school can partner with DOT and possibly have the parental drop-offs, which do happen if they are significant, possibly drop them off a block away or half a block away or a designated place on 54th Street or Woodside Avenue, just because, if the principal has an awareness of that, it may be not so turbulent. Bobby?
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for this presentation, of course. On the topic of, especially given how wide Northern Boulevard is, I had kind of two related questions. The median going, this full stretch, I was curious, first, if there was going to be any like trees or anything included to, especially lower temperatures and stuff, because the sun can be pretty intense on those corridors that are as wide as these kind of places are. And then also, due to the width, even with the median, which I do think will help reduce vehicle speeds a lot, that'll, effectively cut it down quite significantly, which I'm very happy to see. I was curious, though, still to add an additional layer of protection. I'd love if something like bollards might be considered along, in the sidewalk area, curb area, wherever is generally appropriate for those kinds of things, especially considering the volume of kids on the sidewalk. Just in case if vehicles veer off into the sidewalk, if they lose control. Northern Boulevard in general is probably one of the places I see the highest vehicle speeds as a pedestrian and as a biker. And I think we've all seen, way too many news stories of what happens when drivers lose control and fly into storefronts, hit people on the sidewalk, all that kind of stuff.
It's tricky with the bollards. They are they're not a treatment that is currently in DOT's toolbox, or a treatment that is a standard that we can install. So installation of bollards here will require procuring multiple bollards, which agency currently does not have, and B, very extensive reviews with Public Design Commission. We will evaluate this again after the school opens. For now, we do not have plans for bollards at this location.
Thank you for the info.
It's a shame. Next on our list of yellow hands is Bob, Evie, and then you. Evie?
Oh, sorry. I thought I unmuted myself. I was also going to make a plug for trees as well along the median. It's a very, there's like not a blade of grass or a tree in sight along in that area. And I think it's really, really important, even just for young people going to school, to have that green around them. So I just want to make a plug for that. The other thing, my question was, I'm assuming there's going to be like traffic lights, right, from going to McDonald's to the school, which is actually going to be more than one high school. It's not just, there's going to be several different schools within that building, from what I understand. So to Quinella's point, if it's a specialized magnet school, you might have kids coming, I think, from all over who might be coming from areas that are, transit deserts, right, where the parents drive. So I do think it is important to think about that. But anyway, just my question. So there will be like traffic lights there, or pedestrian crossing?
Yes, we're keeping the traffic signals on this crossing.
Okay, great.
We're just removing the
turn
the turn bay.
Okay.
As to trees, we would also love to see trees here. We are currently coordinating. This is above MTA. This is above the subway line. So if both MTA and Parks approve this, we'll work with Parks to make sure trees are planted here.
They can be planted in big kind of concrete planters. You see that in Manhattan. So, it doesn't have to be planted right in the ground either. It could be just be nice to see something there to beautify
Evie,
it.
I was actually I was actually going to mention that, from our experience from installing medians like this from 2017 and in the CB1, CB2 area, and then doing some of this work in the CB3 area a little bit east over the last couple of years, we've attempted to install trees, and it hasn't gone well. And so I think, if after we go through the MPA review and speak with Parks, if and give it an attempt and see if it's feasible. If it isn't feasible, we can work on planters. There's another experience that I had with the Woodhaven Select Bus Service project. When we went into a portion of Capitol over there, we installed a specific genus of tree, and it just didn't do well on Woodhaven. And we doubled back. We got an additional funding. We never walked away from the project. And 2 years later, we installed some different trees with some councilmatic funding. And those trees are surviving now, and they're there, they're thriving. So, that's another thing. We like to beautify our projects and we don't walk away. The only thing here is that, the MTA rail line below might cause some issues. But if we can overcome that and we can, get Parks to prove something, I think we can do something a little bit special. Things are different in CB1, 2 land than they are in 3. So let's just see if, the traffic, allows for these folks, for these trees to survive. But it's interesting how specific corridors, impact our trees. I've learned a lot about that, working with our brothers and sisters in Parks. So definitely hear you loud and clearly on that. It's definitely something that we'll make sure we try to work with Elena and Robbie here to kind of get in. But if planters, we got to go planters, we know how to do that too. And that's something that we can do quick. Where's our council members at? But yeah, no, we can have that follow-up conversation with them too. And we actually have a follow-up, coming up with both council members on this. So we'll make sure we actually proactively mention that ask from you and this TC here and see if, if we can overcome those challenges, that we can work on planters.
TC1. You?
Thanks, Dom. Thanks, DOT, for the presentation. I have a couple questions. So one, the crosswalks seem kind of small. Is there any reason why it can't be the entire space in between those crosswalks?
You mean they're not typical width?
Yeah, they seem very narrow, and to Nas's point, probably couldn't hold all of the kids that are going to be crossing the street to McDonald's. They're going to be outside of the crosswalk.
Yeah, so they're currently in this drawing. We don't really we haven't really finalized the drawing just yet, so we're still kind of in the process of adjusting these depending on the volumes. But right now, the width is dictated by the driveways and the traffic signals on the curbside of Northern Boulevard. That's why, yeah, here, it's the driveway from McDonald's that kind of limits us to widen that side of the crosswalk. But yeah, we'll definitely have to look into if we still can widen the crosswalks.
Got it. Yeah, I think at least at the very minimum, the area between the two crosswalks in the refuge area should be walkable. So let's say they miss the light, like they should be able to at least continue across. So I don't know if that's the plan right now.
So we
Like,
should.
is that... Sorry, did you hear? Did you understand my comment? I'm not sure my connection's off.
No.
Okay, so sorry.
Yeah, can you explain?
I wanted to know if the refuge, the median between the two crosswalks, the red area is walkable.
Yeah, the red are the tactile strips. So those are cut throughs.
I meant between them.
Oh, between.
Like
that's
between the left and the right. Let's say you missed the light, right?
You can stand on it. It's like a regular concrete island. It's exactly what you
Okay, but it's not accessible. Is that what you're saying? Like it's gonna be raised
Yeah, it's going to
Like,
be,
okay.
we're not planning to make it accessible. That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that like students are going to start walking when the stop starts to blink. They might not make it all the way across. If they get halfway, they may want to continue walking in one direction, and they're going to want to go to the other crosswalk. So making them accessible, will will be very helpful because this is what they're going to want to do anyway. Does that make sense?
It
It
does
does.
make sense, but yeah, I think it is not really advisable for students to walk through the island with the
Well,
moving traffic
I'm
around
sure.
them.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not advisable. But I'm
Yeah.
saying that's what they're gonna do, right? Like
I mean,
they're
it is
not gonna wait until.
it is going to be a 10 feet concrete island. So if
Mhm.
they want to walk on that island, they're welcome to. At the same time, our preference would be to keep the cutouts between the in the median pretty narrow. We see issue with illegal U-turns.
Sure, and
In
I
front of
think we
schools,
can.
and we would like to prevent that. So
Right,
this
I
is
think an
not
alternative, yeah, could be to have the entire everything in between flat and have ballers to prevent U-turns, but will allow people to walk between the crosswalks while they're waiting for the light to turn.
we'll
And you,
consider.
oh, sorry.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
Was there-
And I'm just speaking, yeah, I'm speaking from experience because I went to middle school off Queens Boulevard way back in the day. And before fences were installed, all the kids would cross at random times. So I think having been in that experience before, like we should design it in a way that like people are going to take shortcuts and we should make it as safe as possible for them when they do. But yes, thank you for listening to my comments.
Yes, and totally understand what you're asking for.
So on that note, just to beat that a little more to death, and you really appreciate the getting into the details. I think it is positive to always have raised concrete wherever possible, and to another suggestion for you's concern of the spread out of the waiting students might be like 6-inch high curbs left and right at the traffic, like a normal curb, but then in between it, a ramp that gets you back on the concrete between the two islands on both sides. So you have accessible waiting area between the two islands, which is raised, but you still would have your curbs left and right, so you wouldn't be encouraging any cars from going out of their lane. So there are ways to treat that would let a bunch of students in accessible fashion wait at the on the median. Because Robbie, is there a minimum width of New York City crosswalks? Is there a maximum width of New York City crosswalks that you're guided to design?
So look here, this is the question here is, the crosswalks will be at least 10 to 12 feet each.
Wide.
And here really the main constraint is the utilities in the roadway and the driveways. We need to provide accessible ramps at each landing of the crosswalk, and they cannot land in the driveways. So we need to provide space between the crosswalk and the driveways. There should be at least 5 feet in between those as well. So the slightly odd placement here is dictated by the driveways.
Yeah.
Sure.
As to like how wide, I mean the widest crosswalk I think we have in the city is 50 feet on Herald Square.
50?
There was a even wider one at like 75 feet in front of Yankee Stadium, but DOT ended up removing it and actually replacing it with two crosswalks like this, because the space that wide of 75 feet was actually confusing to the drivers and was not as good for pedestrians as we assumed it would be.
Yeah, it's like a plaza.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, more of a plaza than a crosswalk. So Richard is joined late, but we still will let him talk. Hi, Rich.
Hi, how you doing?
We're
I'm
doing
sorry
well.
I joined late. I just have a quick question. Have you discussed this at all with the NYPD and with the school crossing guard? And do you ever make any specific accommodations for them? Because I'm sure that they're going to be on site, and we want to make their job as easy and visible as possible. I don't know if any special accommodations are ever needed, but I'm wondering whether you've investigated that.
We typically do not provide special accommodation for NYPD crossing guards, and we cannot influence their placement in any way. I actually do not know if there will be crossing guards at this location and if they have been requested. I definitely recommend that community board follows up with this. On this is with NYPD. We unfortunately cannot really influence their placement and number of crossing guards at any school locations. From my personal experience, I think the crossing guards will be very, very happy with this median.
Good. Okay, well,
Richard.
they're important, so, okay.
Okay. Richard, one thing, we can follow up, but, let's remember, right, this is the border for two precincts. So, when we have the conversation with CB2 next Monday, we'll speak with 108th. 108th usually comes to that TC meeting, but we'll also, work with the district manager for 2 and with Florence to make sure that those asks are made of both of the 114th and the 108th at our district service cabinet meetings. But I do agree also with Elena, that if there is a crossing guard that is going to be placed there, he or she or they are going to love this median. We get asks from crossing guards in locations like this all the time, and so it's something that would be welcomed, we imagine.
I expect so, yes. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Ella, you get the last question, then I have a comment.
Okay, so yeah, my question is quick. Did you think about in the research, the timing on the traffic lights? When these kids start and, cross the streets and a crossing guard or whatever, but just the timing on the traffic lights, would that change once the school starts?
Yes. So for 51st, it'll definitely change. We will have the as mentioned a while ago, we are adding more green time for the protected left turn from Northern onto 51st, which will give theoretically additional walking time for pedestrians in this area. And then
and there will
Go
be
ahead.
an LPI, so we are making it as pedestrian friendly as possible with the cycle length of the street.
Yeah, Canella, LPI is a leading pedestrian interval. It's an interval within the pedestrian signal phase, within the signal phase at the intersection. That's just for the pedestrian, and it's well in advance and more time to cross if there's a turn conflict. If you go to Broadway and Northern right now, we called it out before. We're talking a lot of transportation ease, but there's a Barnes dance there. And basically, it's a protected signal phase for all pedestrians. No traffic goes. Everybody gets to cross at the same time. So there's benefits now there. And, that's something that folks kind of get now. That's actually kind of a request that we get of a lot of heavily trafficked intersections. And it's really tough to deliver with a heavily vehicular trafficked roadway like this. But given, with the school here, but there's also a train station here. This area, the Broadway specifically in Northern was one that we identified years ago as a need. So that benefits there. And now, as Robbie and Elena are saying, is going to be extended to the mid-block crosswalk and then more time to the western crosswalk. And as those signal timing changes are made, we're also going to work to ensure that mobility for east-west vehicular traffic is also flowing as well. Chris and their team is working on some things because they were part of a bus lane project that's a little bit further east that kind of terminates here at Broadway. But those signal timing changes are also being massaged on the eastern flank, and they're going to work, and jive with Elena's project and Chris's project at 51st and Robbie's project.
No, Jason, it's a term I like, the barn dance. I never thought of it. So one question, Robbie, you just made a circle on where Jason was talking about a three-legged barn dance, but will it also extend to the other side of Broadway, the east side of Broadway? See the northern boulevard crossing there? Will that be in the barn? Will that be invited to the dance?
I think the entire intersection is barn
It
stand.
is.
That one
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the Broadway crossing south side and northern also in the dance?
Yeah, that's all dancing every day.
Wow. I mean, when
as
you
we
think
speak.
about it, if you put an LPI on every single light, it's probably more efficient to do it this way. That's kind of brilliant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but remember though, right? With something like that, you kind of take away phases for vehicular traffic, and then that stoppage, then gets sent to the intersections adjacent to it, right? So you got to be very mindful with where you're putting a barn stance, because it could, especially with the overlay of a lane like this that's heavily trafficked, Northern Boulevard. Remember, we got a bus lane here. There's a lot of convergence here, pedestrian traffic, a bus lane, and then, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, five lanes that kind of feed in or out of this intersection. So we're kind of maxing out when it comes to safety, and kind of focusing on this one block radius and giving the pedestrians the power when it
Yeah, I hear
comes to
you.
crossing
I hear you,
and
but
making, yeah.
But if each LPI is, I'm going to say 10 seconds, that sound right? With that 5 points or 6 points, you could have a minute there of
Oh yeah. Yeah. Former assembly member would ask us a lot of Brian Barnwell will ask us a lot of questions about this every week, and why did it work the way that it worked, and it took us time to explain to him. I mean, he had advocated more so, I guess, for the vehicular traffic, and he felt that it was confusing for the pedestrians, but we found over time, that the benefit's been extended to pedestrians here, and folks have acclimated to it. Especially, you could see the benefit really extending to folks at AM and PM rush when folks are going to work, to catch the train and or the bus to go east west, or coming back from work.
That's a hugely busy pedestrian crossing, Broadway and Northern.
Also good smoothies at the intersection too.
Yep. Okay. So that's another strong presentation. I do want to say to Robbie, my new friend, Robbie, when you do bring your drawings, it would be great to see the traffic lights on there. I just noticed because it was kind of confusing as to where they are and where they're not. If you finish that up, and then even like a little note LPI would be good on it, and then and the crosswalk width. So yeah, and then lastly and not leastly, this high school, people should be encouraged to cycle to this high school. Is there any plans for DOT sanctioned bike parking on the sidewalk of this high school? Because I find that a lot of schools, they like stick it in the back and never gets used.
We're discussing this now with our street furniture unit, and we will follow up with them. DOT has definitely been installing a lot of bike parking specifically next to high school, and we do see increase in biking with teenagers. So we've been receiving requests both from high schools, and we have been installing at high schools. So
and I believe the school also provided a lot of bike rails right in front of the school. Not sure if it's too visible here, but if you can see these blocks with like these metals sticking out, I
Just
think they're already installed there.
Yeah, we see it. I see it. That's
a
amazing.
reminder, right? Those bike racks came at the request of the community, right? The community has been asking, CB2 especially has been asking for all school facilities to come with this, and so SCA has been doing a good job in making sure that they put them in. But if we need more, of course we'll put more in.
So that's great. That looks ample. We work in Fort Hamilton High School by the Verrazano Bridge, and maybe 80 kids cycle to school every day. It's
Great.
it's incredible. And they have the infrastructure for the parking there. I know it's not Astoria, but still it will help. It'll keep school buses, it'll eliminate a few school buses and it'll reduce traffic also. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Elena, Robbie, and Jason for that presentation.
And we'll share both presentations with the board after today's meeting, of course. You know, and always open to having additional conversations if needed. But we'll make sure that once we follow up, you know, we continue following up on some of the questions that we have here. We've taken some notes, and Joe and I will follow up with that after debriefing with Robbie and Elena and Chris and Rachel's team from RIS on the 31st Street project.
Much appreciated, Jason. Thank you very much.
Anytime. Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having us, as always.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thanks for making that joke about the Forest Hills business on Queens Boulevard. I found it very funny.
My pleasure.
It was an inside joke, outside joke, I guess, but I found it very hilarious.
Quite welcome. So we'll move on to, I guess, brief, just any potential old business. Anyone on the committee?
Yeah,
Yes.
little quick piece of old business. Did you ever get the updated list from John Sirico where he like had rankings of the popularity of the requested daylighting?
I don't think so. I actually went away for about 10 days, 2 days after that, and I wasn't at our last meeting, but I'm not sure. I could actually, why don't you take over and let me check my email right now because I don't want to be wrong and it's important.
Yeah, not putting you on the spot here
No,
right
it's a
now,
good
but
question. I
yeah.
don't think so. I was surprised, but I
I
think,
helped him put together the heat map.
okay, so
Okay, yeah,
if he
'cause
did, you know what I actually think happened? I'm not sure if it was before the meeting or after. I think it was after. I think actually what he sent to Florence got sent right on. So I think the answer to your question, Nas, is yes. And I'll confirm that. But
Yeah.
I'll also circle back and update you guys on that, which I should have done. But I
would
think what happened is I think his revised map did get sent on. Sirico.
Yeah, I would say A, let's confirm that. And then B, because I think we kind of landed on, although it was a little murky, that it would also be helpful to make the individual requests as well. So if we have that heat map, you know, maybe a few of us can pick off a couple here and there and just put in those individual requests for, you know, the most popular ones requested or the most popular ones on John's list. So that would be helpful in kind of pushing this along as much as we could.
So John wrote on Friday the 14th. When was our meeting? I think it was before that. I think it was Wednesday the 12th. It was. Hey all, I've gone ahead and changed votes to requests in the letter. Thanks, Florence, for submitting to NYC DOT. Dom, going to provide that updated heat map shortly, just taking a bit longer and doing this on my off time. John, we appreciate you. We really do, and thank you. And then you say, then he gave a list of 10 intersections requested by CB1s for daylighting, and he did put a heat map on it. I'll forward it to you. Let us know if this can be made. So yeah, this is right up exactly what you're talking about, Nas.
Okay, yeah, and it looks like Evie just posted a list of like the top 10 spots. So I don't know, this can probably just happen over email. Maybe just a few of us volunteer to put in a few individually just so that, you know, we have all bases covered in terms of like prioritizing this stuff that we want to see. So not to take up any more meeting time for this explicitly, but
no, this is an important thing for us here.
oh yeah, totally, I agree.
So there's 10 intersections. I will request 1 and 5. Who will do 2 and 6?
I mean, do like
3-1-1 this.
Do like 5 people? We have 10. Do like 5 people want to raise their hand and then we just
Right.
assign
Put your
2?
hand up if you will do some of these for us. Anyone else?
We got 4 hands.
I see 2 hands now. Adam has half a hand.
Adam, yeah, we had Adam.
So 3. Bobby, are you a hand? I don't think you're a hand.
Yeah.
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 Okay, so
All right, well, whatever, 4 of us. So maybe let's just on an email, we'll split it up and then, or if you want to do that right now, and then
oh, that's fine. Let's do that by email. That's fine.
yeah, we can follow up with that.
So Nas, Adam, Bobby, and Dom. And it's 10. Okay, so it'll be 2.5 each. We'll get it done. Thank you, Nas. Any other old business? Any new business? I would like to just mention a follow-up to today's meeting about for us, documenting the request to extend the 31st Street changes north and south of the current extents, 36th Avenue on the south and Newtown on the north. Any thoughts on that procedurally, Evie, or other members of the committee?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they would like to see a letter of support, which, if I think, I mean, I'm in favor of for sure. Maybe that would also be a good opportunity to just, hammer home the point a little bit, like, hey, maybe here's some commercial loading zones we want to see, or please make sure that there are commercial loading zones, or please make sure that there are pedestrian pickoff areas at, the subway stops, let's say. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like they would welcome the letter of support. So I don't know what everyone else feels like about how it feels about that, but I don't think it's a bad idea.
I think it's a good idea. So you're saying not only a letter in support of extending it north or south, but supporting it as a response to their presentation.
Yeah, I would say all of the above, because yeah, I think I heard them, but it sounds like they also kind of can help make a better case for if we're also into it. So yeah, I would love to see it obviously extended as far as possible.
So supporting, extending, and you mentioned clarifying loading zones. Maybe that'll be
and pedestrian pickups, because that's really
right.
a factor at the subway stations.
I mean, Nas, not to belabor it, but the reality might be from looking at those narrow lanes that has to happen on the avenue. Not the end of the world.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Also, I was kind of talking to someone else about this, but King Souvlaki came up, which we love King Souvlaki, but I'm wondering, have you seen any I don't know, maybe in Jackson Heights or something, have you ever seen as part of their design kit like a food truck source, like kind of pedestrian plaza? I mean, I know usually that happens on more like built out plazas, like in Diversity Plaza, that are like strictly no vehicular traffic, but maybe this is one of those situations where they can try something new. I don't know. Is that something we have any feelings on? Obviously, we'd just be limited to that corner or wherever, food trucks decide to go, but I don't know. Maybe it's worth calling out, maybe not. I don't know.
So down, just to kick it around, and I know, Adam, please chime in. I know your hand is up, but feel free to interrupt.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a strong opinion on the food truck thing. Maybe feels a little, just because we're talking about one truck, feels a little weird to be kind of accommodating around just like a one specific business. But I do love the idea in general of like whether they have something in their toolkit for that. I was just going to suggest that we're talking about a lot of things in this letter that we might send, and I don't want to drown out some of the more important things, in my opinions, specifically extending it southward. I think it ends, I'd like to see it go further northward, but it ends at Newtown, which is a reasonable place to turn off. Ending at 36th Avenue on the south side is kind of just like spinning you out into very busy streets with no no clear direction of where you're supposed to go. So if we could in some way just say, we approve it with, I don't know if we want to say with a condition, but with a recommendation of like extending it southward. And if there's any other like really big ticket important things up at the top, and then as a separate section, kind of these other considerations we want to put in there, I think that would make it stronger.
Well, because Frank is not here, I'll give a shot at drafting this and get it for presentation. Down here on 39th Avenue, there's a large, they call it a bus build out. And, it's now got food carts on it. So something like that is happening down at 39th Avenue.
And just for like, I don't know, maybe for organizational purposes, like, okay, our letter of support is just for, hey, we like the design, maybe let's extend it north and south. And then if we really want to get into weeds of like, okay, we'd like to see the loading zones happening as like a separate ask, then, we can just break it out just so that, like Adam said, we don't kind of dilute the purpose of the letter of support,
Yeah, because I'd like to secondarily ask just about all the brown paint becoming concrete, but
yeah,
I also don't want to dilute the global support.
Yeah, and the message I get in, I think we've heard it before that, the pork chops or whatever we end up calling them with the beige paints, ideally they would like them to be concrete, but like for reasons they're not always right away, which is not ideal.
None of them know how to mix concrete. Either Jason or Joseph, none of them. All right. Okay, great. Any other newish business?
Actually, do have one item of newish business, just mentioning that we, as we have heard many times by now, we were the first community board to pass a request for universal daylighting, and has a hearing at City Council on April 21st that anyone can sign up to testify or just tune into if you're interested. So just wanted to bring that up here. There's Transportation Alternatives has a page about it, but I'm sure you can also Google the schedule on the City Council page to find out how to attend.
So that's 4/21, April 21, City Council.
That's correct, yeah.
Which is after, when is our meeting this month? Anybody know? I think I know.
It's on the 15th.
15th. Okay. All right. Thanks, Adam. Any other new business? So it's 8:45. Motion to adjourn. Second was who? Thanks, Bobby. Okay, we'll see you all soon, and thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.